Okay, so you read the title and you're probably thinking this is going to be another really negative Starfield review. That is not the case at all. I love the game, but there are some issues that are very apparent to me, and I do want to get those thoughts out there. I beat the game about a week or two ago, and I was thinking about releasing a video like immediately reviewing the game. But what I tend to do when I play video games is as soon as I finish, I'm still kind of riding that high. And I tend to have a much more positive opinion about the game as soon as I finish it than I have like maybe a week or two after, when I really soak in what I felt about the game, right? So I figured I'd wait a week or two, really collect my thoughts, and then put them all on paper, and then I can kind of read my notes and tell you guys what I think about the game. So let's get right into it. I want to start off with graphics. So overall, the graphics range from okay to really good. And the reason I don't say great or amazing is because there's games out there like Red Dead Redemption 2 and Cyberpunk 2077, which are truly amazing graphics. I don't want you guys to think that Starfield is on par with those games. It simply isn't. The texture detail, the render distances, all of that is just not as good. There is some pop-in. There isn't the level of polish that those games have now. I don't want to say Cyberpunk 2077 had a lot of polish when it released, because I know it didn't. But if you're comparing the level of polish Starfield has right now to the level of polish that some of these really graphically intensive games have, like Cyberpunk, Last of Us Part 2, Red Dead Redemption 2, it just doesn't compare, right? And I don't think that the graphics are frankly going to get any better. I'm not sure they're going to update the game to the point where it's going to reach like the top S tier of graphical games. So the game looks really good. It doesn't look amazing, but it does look really good. And I think it really shines when you're in very specific areas. Okay, so let's talk about the cities. The cities in this game are mostly a highlight. I've loved almost every single city in the game except for the main one. The problem with New Atlantis is that it's too big almost. And I get what they're going for. It's supposed to be one of the richer cities. So they want to have really big buildings. They want to have really wide roads. And I get the art style. I get the reasoning behind this. But as the player, I found it to be almost a little too empty, right? And that's not to say that there aren't NPCs walking around and people to talk to all over the place. But I still don't necessarily like, as the player, to have to run for like 30 seconds to get from one building to another, or to take like a shuttle to get from one part of the city to another. That just isn't like a gameplay style I really meshed with. And there are fast travel options, but we'll get into that later. This game requires fast travel almost a little too much, and it relies on it far more than I would like for it to. In terms of the other cities, I'm not going to get into spoilery territory because I want you guys to have the same impression of the game that I did when I first landed on some of these like really dense cities, right? So I'm not going to talk about the names of the cities or anything, but I will say that the game has a very diverse color palette. So when you go into the main city, you might notice like this really bright blue, uplifting color palette that you won't get in the next city that you will see. The next city might be really drab and brown, and I really, really love this. I love their approach to kind of showing the amount of money certain cities have by simply like changing the color palette, kind of showing the player that everything has to be packed in tight in certain cities. Like buildings have to be super close to one another because there just isn't enough space. And I just love the approach that they took. There's even cities that kind of follow like a neon color palette, for example, and you'll feel like you're in Cyberpunk 2077 for that part of the game. It's just really well done. And that being said, that makes my other point even more heavy, that New Atlantis is just simply too big and it leaves a lot to be desired, right? Aside from that, graphics for the guns, graphics for your clothing items, all of that was passable. It wasn't something I thought was, oh man, I'm so excited to customize the way my character looks. I didn't feel like necessarily like playing The Witcher, for example, where the different armor sets that you have really make your character look super cool. I didn't necessarily feel that, but I will say that's a super subjective thing. If you like that kind of NASA kind of art style, you might love this, right? You might love the armor sets, you might love the guns. And there are a variety of guns. There's ballistic weapons, there's laser weapons, and you might cling on to a certain kind of art style when you're looking into your inventory for weapons and your suits and stuff like that. So I would say in terms of inventory items, it's very subjective. Next up, let's talk a little bit about the story. I will say the story is the best part of the game, straight up. I absolutely loved the story. That being said, the beginning hours are super, super boring and dull. Okay, so I would try and just kind of mainline the story until you get to a mission called Into the Unknown. After that mission is when the story really picks up. And don't do what I did. I went into this game relatively blind. I mean, I watched the Starfield deep dive or Starfield direct or whatever they had, but I didn't really watch a lot of reviews, or I didn't watch a lot of like YouTube content on the game. So I wanted to go in blind, and that was almost a mistake because I didn't get the same warnings that I'm about to give you guys, which is do not like start doing side missions off the get-go because you're kind of going to be bored. I would try to mainline the story until you get to that Into the Unknown mission, and after that it really picks up. Not just in terms of, I'm going to try and avoid spoilers here, but not just in terms of like how interesting the story is, but also gameplay. So try to stick to the main story. So that isn't to say like the side content is bad. One of my favorite parts of the game were the faction storylines, especially one of the evil factions called the Crimson Fleet. There's a really interesting way to approach the storyline for that. Usually the evil faction, you kind of have to be an evil character to kind of go all the way through with it, but there's a bit of a twist in Starfield's approach to this faction, and I think it's well worth your time in doing every single faction storyline. And the other thing about the factions is it's really long. Every quest line for each of the factions is really, really long. So let's say if the story's 30 hours, you can easily double that by just doing faction missions on top of the main story, right? So I say you should 100% not just do the main story and kind of explore a little bit of the side content as well. There are also like individual side missions that are also super interesting. Some of them can be boring. Like for example, there were side missions where I had to do the good old like go over here, collect this for someone, go over there, collect that for someone. Those kinds of side missions do exist, but there's also really interesting side missions that, for example, your companions might give you. And side content, I think, isn't as bad as something like Far Cry games. I don't want to get any like hate for that, but it's not kind of running around just kind of getting the question marks. There is like a lot of hand-tailored dialogue for a lot of the side content, so I highly recommend you do that as well. Okay, so let's move on to the gameplay. This is another situation where it's good, not great. Just kind of like the graphics, right? And the reason I say that is there's things that they do well. For example, the gunplay is quite punchy. I really like the gunplay. And something else that's really good is movement. Gravity is different on the different planets. Sometimes there's no gravity. And the way they kind of approach movement is really good. I really like the amount of polish that they put into both the way guns feel as well as the way movement is done. Something I don't like, melee combat. There's almost no impact. There's almost no like build variety for melee combat. You kind of have to stick to the strongest thing you pick up and then keep slashing at the enemies. And if you play on the harder difficulties, like I tried playing on very hard for a bit, actually not a bit, I played on very hard for a long time. A good bit of the story I played on very hard. And melee isn't an option at that point. You kind of have to use your more powerful weapons, right? And that's not to say most weapons aren't powerful, because almost all weapons are really powerful as long as you customize them a little bit. Let's dive into that. Customization, really well done. I love tinkering with my guns. I love kind of changing the barrel. I love changing the type of ammo that I'm using. I love the sights that I'm going to be using in the game. And all of that is very well done. It reminded me a lot of Fallout. Even the UI kind of reminded me of Fallout. They didn't try to change up too much there, except for the art style, of course. And no need to fix what's not broken, right? So I think the gunplay and customization for that gunplay is all very well done. Okay, so let's talk about the negatives in terms of gameplay. Inventory management is really, really bad. So you are going to be spending like, I want to say like 25% of your in-game time just messing with your inventory. Either having to decide what to throw out because your inventory is full, or having to decide what to keep on your ship, what to take out of your ship, or even having to go to different vendors, which is also a pain because vendors only have so much money. So you have to either visit a vendor, go back to your ship and sleep, and then visit the same vendor again, or you have to go to a vendor on one planet and then go to a vendor on another planet just so you can actually sell everything you want to sell. A lot of times you're going to need materials you won't get to keep on your ship because those materials are too heavy, but you need those materials to do research. It's just all a horrendous mess, and it really, really brings down the quality of gameplay that is put forth for you, right? So even though the movement's great, the gunplay's great, all of that's great, that all is taken away when I'm spending a quarter of my time just managing the amount of crap I have in my inventory. And this really hurts to say because, guys, I truly love this game, but this needs to be fixed. Something I can recommend is if you give it a minute, I think there's going to be a lot of mods. They might already exist. I didn't mess with mods too much, but there's probably going to be a mod out there that fixes a lot of these issues I had with the inventory management. But as it stands, this is probably the worst inventory management system I have played in any Bethesda game. I didn't deal with it to this extent in Fallout 4. I didn't deal with it to this extent in New Vegas, although I didn't finish New Vegas. I had a lot of stuff going on at the time, so I didn't really get to finish that game. Highly regret it. I know it's a great game, but this is probably the worst inventory management I've ever dealt with, and that really sucks to say. This inventory management issue kind of bleeds into other problems I have with the gameplay cycle, right? So for example, let's say you go and you do a main story or a side mission or something. After every mission that you do, you're going to have way too much stuff in your inventory, at least if you're a hoarder like me. You're going to want to pick up every gun, you're going to want to pick up every suit because they're worth a lot of money. Money is really important for shipbuilding and buying parts, so if you're anything like me, you're going to want to pick up everything. You're going to want to sell everything. When you pick up everything and you want to sell everything, you're going to have to do it after every single mission. I upgraded the carry capacity to the max. That was one of the first things I did. Even with that, and even with the amount of storage I had in my ship, which wasn't a lot. I think it was maybe like 1,000, something like that. Even with all that storage, I ran out all the time after every mission. So the gameplay cycle that leads to is you do the mission, you go back to your ship. A lot of times you have to walk back to your ship. You can't teleport to your ship because you're carrying too much. So you walk back to your ship, which is a tedious process because the planets are really big. You're almost always going to have to land on a planet and then walk somewhere. And that walking process is also a big part of the game. So you walk back to your ship, you go back to one vendor, you sell as much as you can to that vendor, and then on that same planet, hopefully you can find another vendor, sell as much as you can to that vendor, go back to your ship, either sleep, and then go back to the vendors you just sold to, hoping that the economy has reset for them, or you go to a different planet and then sell to another vendor, which is usually what I did because I didn't want to have to spend time sleeping because it actually takes like 30 seconds or something if you want to sleep for 24 hours. That might be an incorrect number, but it felt like it took a long time. This cycle of having to do a mission and then spending that long to just sell stuff gets really tedious really quickly. And something else that I encountered, and I talked about this a little bit earlier in the video, but whenever you do the cycle and you're selling stuff, you're going to want to keep certain materials just so you can keep researching items or researching different foods you can make or whatever, researching the different gun barrels you want to make or whatever. There's like a research system in the game in which you'll need like aluminum and you'll need binding agents and stuff like that. Those materials you'll want to keep. after like a certain point, you're going to be overflowing with materials. There's just going to be not enough space in your ship. There's not going to be enough space in your inventory. And that just becomes so tedious to have to deal with. I really hope either Bethesda fixes this or there's a mod that fixes this in these upcoming weeks. Something else that I want to talk about when it comes to gameplay is I loved the companion system, but it had one really big flaw. So I get that this game wants you to play through New Game Plus and play through the game again and again and again. I get it. What I don't like is that the companions all have a specific side mission you can do for them, right? You can only get that side mission if you reach a certain level of companion trust or whatever they call it in this game. Once you reach a certain bond level with said companion, the companion will basically launch up a quest line for you. You do that quest line. After completing an entire quest line for a companion I had, I wanted to divorce that companion and then move on to the next one so I could also experience the next quest line. This was not doable for me. I don't know if this is like a viable option at all, but I tried everything I could. I tried loading up different saves, and it was really difficult for me to figure out a way to start flirting with a different companion so I could play through a quest line for that other companion. And I really don't like this. And I really don't want to play 4 New Game Pluses to experience 4 different quest lines for 4 different companions. So shipbuilding and outpost building is good. Shipbuilding I experimented with a lot and I loved it. Outpost building I barely touched, but it was okay. Like I didn't have an issue with it. Both of those systems are completely unnecessary in my opinion. If you don't want to do them, you don't have to. You can always buy a ship. There's a ton of ships and I think homes that you can get through quest lines, and those will suffice if you don't want to have to mess with actually building stuff, because building these ships and building the outposts will take up a ton of your time, like hours and hours. So if that's not like a gameplay mechanic you enjoy, you don't have to experiment with it. I liked the shipbuilding. I experimented with a bit, the outpost building a bit, and that was okay as well. There's some traits that you get when you build your character at the very beginning of the game, and then there's other traits that you obviously won't have that you'll have to kind of get by leveling up. This upgrade system can feel very slow. Me having done almost, I don't want to say everything in the game because this game is really big, but I did a lot of the content in this game, and I still feel like I should have gotten all the upgrades maybe a little bit sooner. And I get that they're maybe trying to motivate players to do New Game Plus to get those upgrades. So this isn't something I'll necessarily hold against the game, but subjectively, I just don't think that I liked the way they approached the upgrade system. It just took too long. So this New Game Plus is probably the best New Game Plus I think I've ever experienced in any game, just the way they approached it. And I say that for games that are relatively linear. Obviously, starting up a new game in games that are super not linear, like Baldur's Gate 3. And I keep referencing that game because I'm playing through that still. I started that game before Starfield, but it's so big, I'm still playing through it. And comparing this game to that game, Baldur's Gate 3 is significantly more options oriented. Like, you have a lot more choice in that game. So when you play a new game in that game, you're basically playing a whole new storyline. Starfield has one storyline, but the way they approach New Game Plus is very well done. I'm gonna try not to spoil things here, but basically you don't have to replay the story when you do New Game Plus. And I really like that choice, that option of allowing me to decide what I want to do, right? I absolutely love the way they've implemented New Game Plus here. Okay, so let's talk about bugs and kind of why you should wait. First off, when it comes to frame rates, there were really severe dips in frame rate whenever I was in one of the major cities. Not the main city. New Atlantis was fine because it's so spaced out. There's not a lot of, dense, tightly packed buildings or anything. Even the NPCs, there's a lot, but there's not as many as some of the other cities you're going to go to. So New Atlantis isn't that big a deal. The other cities, the FPS drops are very, very severe. I have a 4090 and I have a very beefy PC. I have one of the best AMD processors, and I still experience these FPS drops. This might not be something everyone experiences, but I just wanted to warn you guys that those do exist for me as of right now, and I hope they fix it in these upcoming updates. There were a few game-breaking bugs that caused me to reload the game, and these reloads made me lose like about 30 to 45 minutes of gameplay. That might not sound like a lot, but that's just super tedious to have to redo those same quests or whatever again, right? So just wanted to warn you guys, there are some game-breaking bugs that I experienced. Might not be everyone's experience, but those were something I experienced. In terms of crashes, I crashed once, and frankly, like it didn't influence anything at all. When I crashed and I reloaded almost at this exact same spot. So it wasn't a big deal, but I feel like I kind of have to tell you guys that I did have one crash. Okay, so let's get to the core of this review. Why should you wait to play Starfield? Let me start off by saying I absolutely loved this game. There wasn't really too much wrong with it. The bugs that I did experience, they sucked, but it wasn't something that like made me go, oh man, I'm not gonna play this game again or anything. I didn't rage quit or anything like that. Those bugs were understandable. I mean, it's a really, really big game, and it's gonna have some Bethesda jank. And frankly, it was more polished than a lot of the other Bethesda titles at release, so the bugs aren't necessarily even that big an issue for me. The reason I think you should wait to play this game is because Bethesda recently talked about their future plans and the future scope for their upcoming updates. Something they mentioned when they're talking about these upcoming updates are really, really core game settings that I think every single game should have at release. If they told me that they were never going to release these settings, I would tell you guys right now to go buy it. Knowing that some of these settings are going to release with future updates, I really think that you guys should wait, because if I had access to these settings, I feel like my experience would have been exponentially better. I have a 32:9 monitor. One of the settings, for example, is a 32:9 monitor compatibility. I had to play the whole game with really massive black bars on the side. That's just one example. I'm going to run down the list of what I think are some of the core features that they're going to implement, and I'll tell you guys why I think it's really important you wait for these features to be added. So the first one, brightness and contrast controls. This is super, super big. I played on a OLED monitor, and there were just sections of the game that were super muddy. And like I said, I had really big black bars on the side, so I knew what true blacks look like. Right? I had that like in my visibility, in my peripheral vision as I was playing the game. And having that in my peripheral vision and seeing the super washed out blacks in the game itself was really off-putting and kind of took me out of the immersive aspects of the game, right? So brightness and contrast controls 100% should have been there at release. They were not available to me. I think you guys should wait to have those settings. Next up, HDR calibration menu. Another setting that I think kind of has the same points as brightness and contrast settings. Just wait if you have an OLED monitor, especially if you have a really good display, HDR 1000 plus or anything like that. Just wait until these settings are implemented in the game. The next one is really, really big, FOV slider. This one is going to be giving you guys headaches if you're sensitive to that kind of thing. FOV slider, in my opinion, is super, super important. At times even more important than brightness and contrast controls, because I know some people just literally would not be able to play this game with the current FOV settings, right? So FOV slider should have been there at launch. You guys should wait for it. NVIDIA DLSS support. So this game had a partnership with AMD, I'm pretty sure. So AMD cards, I think you guys don't necessarily need to wait. I have a NVIDIA RTX 4090. So I think I would have benefited from waiting for this DLSS support, would have gotten much better frame rates, especially with the really good lit areas. Like, for example, one of the cities is super dense and has a lot of like lighting stuff going on in it. It's like neon colors, think like a cyberpunk kind of world. And I feel like in that city, DLSS would have helped out a lot. And then one of the more comical ones which will help, but I don't think this is like a reason you guys should necessarily wait, is they're going to add a eat button for the food. So like when you see food laying around, you could just directly eat it instead of putting it in your inventory first, going into your inventory and then eating it. They're just going to add like a eat button for food. This isn't too big a deal for me. Whenever I wanted to heal, I ate a bunch of stuff at once anyway, so that wouldn't be like a super impactful thing for me. All the other settings, on the other hand, I would say are significant reasons for you guys to wait. If you wait maybe just like a couple months, for example, you'll get the game cheaper. I know Black Friday is going to come up in November, and then Christmas is coming up after that. You'll probably get the game for cheaper then anyway, and hopefully they'll have implemented some of these settings by that point as well. So overall, I don't think the game is necessarily bad, but these lack of like certain settings, I think, is a good reason to just like wait it out. Wait, at that point, there's also going to be more mod support and a lot better mods that are released as well. That'll probably fix a lot of the gameplay issues I had, like inventory management, for example. So I think overall the game's really good, but maybe just give it a couple months, and I think you guys might enjoy it a little bit more. This was supposed to be a lot shorter of a review, so I'm gonna sign off right now, but hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. I know this was more of a casual one, not a lot of gameplay I'm showing or anything like that, so let me know what you guys think. If you guys liked the video, let me know. Maybe leave a like. If you didn't like the video, leave a dislike. Maybe leave a comment letting me know what you didn't like. If you'd like me to change the structure of the video or anything, I'd love to improve these videos as much as I can for you guys. And if you like the type of content I create, if you've watched some of my other videos, maybe leave a subscribe. I'll try and post as much as I can. I try and post every week. I've been slacking the last couple weeks. Had a lot going on with work and stuff. So I'll try and post a little bit more in these upcoming months though. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Take care. Bye.